One of the editors I used to work with, he used to tell me that he liked my images because he could taste the place.
Welcome to Photography Life. I'm John Sherman, and that was delicious. Lick your chops, because today we're talking with Jack Dykinga, legendary landscape photographer and Pulitzer-prize winning photojournalist. Jack's impressive career has spanned over half a century, from shooting for the Chicago Tribune and Chicago Sun-Times to contributing to Arizona Highways and National Geographic. In 1971, Dykinga was awarded photojournalism's highest honor, the Pulitzer-prize for feature photography, for his story on abysmal conditions at state mental hospitals. Dykinga has 10 books to his credit, the latest being Capture the Magic. It's this book, with its sublime photos and educational text, that inspired me to head to Tucson and seek an audience with the legend. Dykinga was sharp, funny, down-to-earth, opinionated, and impassioned. Please join us as Jack tells us about his photography life.
I would say that my influences in landscape photography were not landscape photographers. It came from photojournalism. So the overriding theme in all my work is telling a story. And that would be journalism and documenting a scene and sort of honoring the subject and then portraying it in a compelling way so that somebody can understand it and be, driven to look at it, basically, and hear the message. I've had a very fortunate life in that I've had a chance to work with and around some of the best in the business. But there's a guy named Larry, a guy who doesn't get much credit. Larry Burroughs was a Life magazine photographer who shot some of the best Vietnam footage and stills, and had just tons of Life magazine covers over the years. But I would put Larry Burroughs really high on my list. I had a kind of an eclectic group of people that I liked. I liked Yusuf Karsh for his portraits. I liked Ansel Adams because he started me thinking about near and far and large format. You like Eugene Smith for his Minamata mercury poison piece. And probably of all the people you were, going back to people that influenced you, Philip Hyde was a friend, and I guess he was Ansel Adams' first student in San Francisco, and then he and Ansel produced the format series of Sierra Club books, which of course made a bunch of national monuments and parks. But so Phil and I he's the closest thing to a mentor that I had in landscape. And I read about Philip back when I was in Chicago as a photojournalist, about this man's lifestyle of going out and documenting wild places and then making a difference. So that was a profound thing for me, because I was already a sizable fish in a sizable pond, but I had to leave all that to come in and be born again as a landscape photographer. I should back up a little bit further, because before I started photographing for the newspapers, I did publicity photographs at O'Hare Airport of celebrities. And that was large format. It was, basically a speed graphic or a Mamai, 2.25. So then I went to the newspapers, and it became 35 millimeters. So, they're just different tools you use to do the job, basically. So the overarching theme is the way you think, and I always have thought sort of spatially in a near to far. Near to far is like a cliche that people attribute to certain photographers, and I just think it's one of the things you do. You got a wide angle lens, you're gonna have near to far, right? Telephoto lens, you're gonna compact it, and I think when I went from shooting journalism to large format, I was not fully formed as far as what I wanted to be. And what large format does is it teaches you to slow down, to be very deliberate in compositions, and to really utilize the canvas in front of you. So you're much more aware of corners and flow, texture, how light creates form, and how that creates a composition. So it only took me 50 years of doing this to figure it out, but what happens is that, they're all components to making you who you are. Well, lots of friends of mine have done the same thing or tried to do the same thing, and they had a really hard time going from one genre to another, maybe because I am dyslexic. When I looked at an image upside down and backwards, it looked great. I mean, I could compose much better that way. I first initially thought about, doing stitches versus a single exposure on a 4x5. Well, it turns out most of the 4x5 exposures were in excess of 10 seconds, 6 to 10 seconds, and sometimes 15, 20, 30 seconds. I mean, I made minute exposures, 2 minutes for a geographic shot. But once I kind of put that together in my head, I just thought, I can use a tilt-shift lens and shift across the same plane, optical plane, with 5 verticals and make a 4x5 horizontal in less time than it would take me to shoot a 4x5. The great thing about the Nikon in general is it's more photographer friendly. It has a lot of manual things like mirror lock. In other cameras you have to go through a menu to get to it. But you already hit on some of the big things. But live view is incredibly important for what I do. Split screen live view focusing is about the best thing that's ever been invented, because then you can do a near to far simultaneously check on your focus. Magnified near and far with that split screen. So if I'm doing a stitch pan over with a shift, I'm just going to do the near to far so they're both sharp, stop it down, and blaze away. To me, photography's never been easier. The other thing I started using Sigma art lenses. There's this whole art series lenses, right, which are all 1.4, and they're extremely sharp, because one of the things you find out is that the newer cameras like the D10, the Canon, whether they're top of line 50 megapixel, they exceed the carrying capacity of the sensors, of the lenses. I'm sorry, the sensor exceeds what the lens can provide, and so you start seeing all the warts in some of your older lenses. Some of them just look like not so good. But it's a lot of technological mishmash that is not at all the reason I got into photography, but you sort of have to know it. It's unfortunate. I feel like I need to take a shower after I learn all this stuff. but it is daunting. And a lot of people gave up, and they just didn't want to. It wasn't worth it to keep going. But sometimes I'm sort of fascinated by it, and some of the stuff I really like. There's also a lot of really, really, really bad things, and the worst of the worst is that it seems like the discipline of photography is kind of taking it in the shorts. There's no set formula. It's my attitude is that the best photographs I ever take are the easiest ones. It's like when I'm walking along and it just knocks me over. It happens very rarely, but it does happen. But most of the time I'll see something and it'll be the wrong time of day, or something's not quite right. And photographer's not much unless he's an obsessive compulsive. So I'm pretty obsessive. So I'll come back and do it at the right time. But most of the time, it's the second or third pass, and then I'm apt to go back. Different seasons, different years. I'm pretty boring. I typically start off looking at intimate details, and then looking at doing the what if, lining it up against a grand landscape, with the idea that if the weather does break and I get what I want, or something spectacular, I'm going to be ready to go. Another analogy, it's like a relationship. You can have a one-night stand, or you can get to know somebody. And so to me, to really understand an ecosystem, for instance, or a biome, you really need to be there at different times to see what's going on. And I think, like I said, you have this relationship, then you can better tell the story of sometimes a pretty complex ecosystem. That one's easy. They're in a hurry. They can't slow down, and it's it's sort of a product of our culture. That's what's one of the beauties of, as you were saying, you have a tripod, which is in a sense bolting you to the ground. Using live view as a way to see the whole palette or the canvas in front of you, and you can be a little bit more deliberate in composition. And the nice thing about landscape, as opposed to wildlife or any kind of people action shots, is that it's more contemplative. But what happens is that because it is a computer and it can go fast, people want to go fast. It's a landscape in front of you that's going to be very deliberately composed, and you're going to watch all the lines and how they interact with the corner and the rule of thirds and all kinds of stuff that really makes it a composition. And then waiting for the light to really paint it, or the color of the light. That sort of contemplative approach and the patience to do that is something that not everybody has, and most people struggle with. This is the only easy question you ask me. You take an orange, and you hold up the orange, and you walk around it. That's it. You can enlarge that and talk about the color temperature, and that's when it gets a little bit more nuanced. But basically, light creates form, and that's it. That's the whole enchilada. I call it volume. And it's sort of like the volume of, it's like we were talking about, you can whisper with the photograph or scream. But the more contrast the light, the more you're screaming, the more rich the blacks are, the more like exclamation marks. There's all kinds of analogies to writing. And, like a tight sentence is what you strive for. Same thing with a photograph. Oh, it's art, let them express themselves. Well, if you're any kind of an artist, you knew that there was a foundation of learning art, the basics first, and having that foundation, knowing what you can do, and then you can splurge and get crazy. And every time they ratchet up the saturation or the black point or something to make it more gonzo color, you keep saying, oh, it looks better and better, and then when you're done, you look at it, you've got Frankenstein. And it has to do with what's your intent for the photograph. If you're trying to nail somebody's eye in a magazine, flipping through pages to show them an advertisement, then you might want gonzo. But then sometimes your voice may be more of a whisper than a shout. And I think photography can pretty much decide the level of volume that you want to transmit a message with. I see photographers all the time taking photographs instead of making photographs. And I also see people, they'll say they saw a photograph, but they won't know who the photographer was. That's inconceivable to me. I mean, when I was starting off, I knew everybody's byline. Well, I have a contemporary, I've always been a fan of Carl Clifton's work. Patricio Robles-Gil, Franz Lanting, Daniel Beltras, George Steinmetz. And what you're seeing here is a group of photographers that I feel are doing substantial work. Committed environmentalists first. that happen to make really compelling images. And to me, that's, photography is really hollow unless there's a purpose. A photograph needs a reason for being. A lot of people do the bam bam thank you ma'am kind of shots. They just kind of another roadside attraction. I would not encourage anybody to become a photographer. As you said, the number one thing, there's lots of 30-year-olds that are really confirmed environmentalists, but they can't make a living because they're up against doctors and lawyers who will spend $3,000 to make a $10 photo sale. The problem with photography now, or it's always been the problem, is that it's a perfect medium for copying. It's basically you're a copy machine with legs. So I guess the best advice is to resist that and try to find your own path. I've got a bunch of bucket lists now. It's at this point in my life they're called the fucket lists. Fuck it. So, but I want to go back to Baja. Baja to me is incredibly special. So, and I want to go north. So I want to point the truck north until I run into water, and point the truck south until I run into water, and see what happens in between. To me, it's not about a place, it's about the sense of discovery. And I guess maybe I'm just a big kid, but I'm always curious and I'm always wondering what's around the corner. And when I first came out to Arizona, when I looked at a map of Arizona, I basically was fixated on this area between Ajo and Yuma, the Cabeza Prieta. It's a gigantic roadless mass in the middle of a pretty populated state. So I had to go there. It's gotten a lot more intense since my surgery. I cry at the drop of a hat now. It's like, I get really choked up by stuff, My first day back, when I drove from Escalante to Boulder over the Hell's Backbone, I thought, I just started crying. But it was like such a rebirth experience for me. It was cathartic. I was like, I'm getting choked up talking about it now. But it's so many, great places I've been to, and been, so fortunate. So, what a great job. Cooper's hog just went right by there. It's probably some guy in India wants me to tell me that I have a problem with my PC. Okay, talk. Let me show you a Chicago trick. No sweat.
I know.
You is what you is. If you got diarrhea of the mouth, nobody's gonna listen to you. If you got diarrhea of the eye, the same thing's gonna happen. I'm not looking at you anymore. Stay real, stay honest. Give it a shot. Hey, Marg.